Yeah, this is what we do. Logistics wins wars, it ain't no dispute. Shout out to my veterans, I gotta give salute. Mafia will finally get to tell the truth. Let them know it, let them know it. Right now is the time, yeah, this is the moment. Hey, let them know it, this is what we do. Mafia will finally get to tell the truth. Let's go.
Hey everyone, this is Delaina, and welcome back to Zero Dark Thirsty Mafia Made. I am here with my friend Nathanael Young, the best recruiter on the market, 100%. Future Business Development Vice President. I'm just putting that in the atmosphere. He is absolutely amazing. He's had a hell of a journey from corpsman to now hopefully working within business development at QTC Health, Lido's company. Currently, he's a senior recruiter for them and knocking it out of the park, has been knocking it out of the park. I'm so excited he's here. And obviously, we have to go into at some point the memes, right? Because we now have the meme queen and the meme king in the same call, on the same episode. I'm just saying, we got to go into that at some point. Oh, tell us all about you. Welcome, Nathanael. So, Nate, let us know, like, what did you do in the military? What were you?
Yeah, thanks, Delaina. That was an awesome introduction. But honestly, I was about to say that you're the best recruiter on the market and that somebody needs to snatch you up. So I was a U.S. Navy corpsman for 8 years from 2014 to 2022. My first tour was Balboa Naval Hospital on the med-surg ward. Did 2 years there, treating the casualties from OEF and OIF. I was able to, from that experience, qualify for my license for nursing. Took the test, challenged it in California, and passed. Then next duty station was with the U.S. Marine Corps, where I was attached with the 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines infantry unit. And then after 18 months in deployment to East Europe, I then pivoted over to Engineer Battalion, Combat Engineer Battalion on Camp Lejeune within the Marines as well. Did another 1.5-year tour there with them, another little stint in East Europe. And then my final duty station was in Portsmouth Naval Hospital, working in patient admin before then pivoting into 2 COVID response teams during the pandemic. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Now that's kind of a lot. So you're definitely able to get a lot of experience in multiple areas, actually, within the healthcare system in the military. So tell me, like, because we're going to kind of talk about that at some point on the transitioning service members who are in healthcare into the civilian sector. But now you're a senior recruiter. So help me understand, how was that transition path? What led you to go into recruiting, and how did that healthcare background help you?
Yeah. So I pivoted into recruiting. My daughter, my firstborn, was born April 24th, 2022. In the labor room, I decided that I was going to get out of the service, which was going to happen pivot-wise in November of that same year. I was actually had my reenlistment paperwork at home that I was going to sign. And after holding my daughter, I was like, you know what? Not worth it. I'm going to get out. So I got on LinkedIn, and when I joined LinkedIn December 2017, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get out after my first contract. Ended up not getting out because of the job market. Went into re-enlisted, and then once my daughter was born, I went back on LinkedIn. I had about 50 connections, never touched it for 5 years. Got on there within the first month, grew to 500 connections, landed 12 job interviews through direct messaging, like vice presidents, other recruiters. Eventually, I came across a recruiter named Tiffany Chapp, who was kind enough to see that I have a salesman personality. I have some salesman experience before the military. And she thought with my license for nursing and my healthcare background, personality, that'd be a perfect fit for the clinician team. So I actually utilized the DoD SkillBridge program, an internship program, to make that career pivot. Did a 3-month internship that then turned into full-time clinician recruitment. Honestly, having that nursing license and the healthcare background has been a massive asset.
Mm-hmm.
within the healthcare field because I'm able to not only talk the talk, but I've walked the walk. So it helps me build rapport very quickly with candidates, as well as gives me access to social media groups that other healthcare recruiters wouldn't be able to have access to unless they have a license.
I love that you mentioned that because that's something that's huge. That relatability and utilizing your background to translate into another job that wouldn't, I mean, in reality, you're a corpsman in the Navy. If you were to go one for one instead of going recruiting and go directly into something, what would that have been?
So I was interviewing with a few jobs to be a licensed nurse in a clinic. One of them was on Lackland Air Force Base. But when they told me the schedule was 4 a.m. to 2 p.m., I was like, no, thank you. And some of them were like, you would get pitched a job for $30 an hour, and then when you get to the offer table, it was 24. So there was a lot of bait and switches on the nursing side of the house. There was contracts that would have me traveling. So that was what I initially explored. And my initial outreach to Tiffany Chap was I wanted to be an operations manager. I wanted to do practice management. But after talking with me, that's when she pivoted me over to clinician recruitment.
I love that because like it's very much there's and you mentioned that you're able to walk the walk. That's something that I feel passionate about within recruitment. I actually and I know other people feel this, but I feel like, recruitment almost should be a lat move in your progression, not a straight out of college thing because like there's something to be said for buy-in, right? When you've actually worked in that field. And there's not only buy-in from your hiring teams, but there's buy-in from your candidates as well. And that is something that is beautiful for transitioning service members because they have the buy-in. They have actually worked with logistics, worked in procurement, worked in control risk or in clinician. They've worked in a clinic as a corpsman like yourself, and they've seen, and you were a combat corpsman for a while, so you've seen all kinds of different arrays and different things that are going to be seen essentially by nursing staff, whether they're going into to be a nurse in a geriatric facility or to be a nurse as an ER nurse, which vastly different,
Yeah.
vastly different. So that experience really just, I think, gave you a boost. But tell us kind of when you hung up the uniform, you made the decision when your daughter was born, which I love that you pointed out your family, and I know from knowing you, your family is extremely important to you. But when you got closer to that date, so walk us through that emotional transition that the Navy is now no more. This is it. You're going to be a civilian. Tell us how that felt.
Yeah. Well, I was pretty lucky, more than I would say most transition service members. I got a 90-day SkillBridge, but before that, I was working in the COVID, we call it the COVID tents, but we were doing all the testing for all the deploying units. So it was very I would say lax on the military discipline. We didn't wear uniforms. We wore PT gear. So I was able to demilitarize a lot earlier than most people. And then the skill bridge helped me because I was fully like out of the military environment and into the corporate environment, which was a massive change up. Once I did the skill bridge, as I was coming to the conclusion of it, it was scary. It was daunting because here I had guaranteed benefits, guaranteed pay, couldn't be fired. And even during my skill bridge, I witnessed people get fired. And I was like, man, that is a tough risk, especially when you have a 6-month-old. So it was tough, but honestly, I think SkillBridge, if I had to say anything to like the head of the DoD, SkillBridge is probably one of the most essential tools that we have for transition service members because it allows us to transition much earlier than just our our end of service duty contract date. Like instead, we can focus while we're still in the service, we still have the breathing room of the benefits, but start to like demilitarize and get corporate or get within our the trade that we're going for, learn the language, learn the talk before we ever truly hang up the uniform.
Absolutely. You know me, I'm a huge fan of SkillBridge.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you keep pointing that out, to be honest with you, because it's huge it's huge for our veterans because they get to start that demilitarized and start connecting and having real conversations. And the biggest thing is, you know what I find the funniest is the fact that you're used to people of a certain age. When you're in the military, most of the people that is one rank below, one rank above, any rank, they're all kind of within an age category, right?
Yeah.
Then you go into the civilian sector and we're all over the dang place. Your coworker could be 65 and then you could have another coworker that's 25. So there's definitely there's people who are driven, who want to be successful and they want to rise in the ranks and they're going for it and whoop. And then you have the other person who's just like, I am happy in my little happy place. I'm gonna hang out right here for 30 years and I'm good with that. So it's a huge difference because that's not military. That's not how they do things. Like
No.
you either get promoted or you get out. This is how we roll. So help me understand like that, how you were able to get in and create those relationships to where you felt safe and secure in your new civilian environment.
I was very fortunate that the organization that I joined, the VP of TA was a Coast Guard auxiliary member. There was multiple team members that were military, and there was quite a few, I would say like 3 or 4 of us that were on SkillBridge. So it was nice because I didn't jump into just a completely brand new environment. I had some support already there with other military veterans. The other thing that I did was like I tried to build my community, so I met veteran advocates like yourself and others and try to embed myself into the community before I ever truly left the service, which I would say is probably one of the best things I've ever done during my transition was having a community established before I leave. In the corporate space, it was, being around other military was okay to cuss. It was okay. I had a learning lesson, being a Navy and like cussing like a sailor. And, my manager who wasn't military was like, hey, man, maybe dial back. But like when I was talking with my fellow service members, it was like, hey, we went from wearing camo to wearing polos and button ups, but we still had the same mentality and we still had the same talk. So I was very fortunate to have like fellow veterans in there. So I would say community. And for those that are transitioning out, seek out the veterans that have already walked the path. And for those that have been out as a veteran, seek out those that are transitioning out and be a community, like help them establish their community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I agree with that wholeheartedly because, a lot of times you have to refocus your mission. And we talk about that with senior leaders, but even with our junior NCOs or NCOs like you, we have to talk about that refocusing the mission. We got to find something else to do with our time because we're not saving lives. We're not running to the battlefield.
That was a tough
There's a lot of
transition there.
yeah, there's a change of identity. And I don't want to call it identity loss. I would like to rephrase it as change of identity because there's still ways for you to get out there. And there's even life-saving ways that you can get out there. You can be a paramedic part-time. You could go be a volunteer firefighter. You could be, my son's dad does the rescue squad where they jump off the side of a mountain and go, because we're in the mountains, cars get slippery, they fall off. He goes and rappels down and saves people. So there's still, but he could get a call at 2 a.m. and that's something in it, right? There's something to be said for that, to still get a call but yet it's not, somebody's in jail because they were drinking and driving. It's you're actually leaving the house.
No,
Well,
you
I guess
said
you were
it.
saving lives before, but you were saving them from the E9, not in the literal
Yeah.
sense, right?
No, you said it good though, like refocus. That was a major tool of mine during my transition, and even now that I'm 3 years post transition, was that I refocused. Like moving from direct patient care, I was burned out because of the COVID pandemic and
Yeah.
everything that occurred there. So, I was very hesitant to go. I still seeked out those opportunities with the nursing job because that's what I was qualified for. When I transitioned into recruitment, it was like, okay, what am I going to wake up for every day? Because I'm no longer having that impact on people health wise, but then I kind of shifted my focus and said, well, you know what? Most people are going to work anywhere from 30 to 60% of their life, and at least 30% of their day is spent at work. So if I can give someone a good job, a good opportunity, I'm impacting at least a third of their day every single day. So that's kind of how I was able to make that refocus, change them from saving lives on the battlefield to saving lives, like, as you know, as a recruiter, right? Like we keep people from unemployment. We keep people from homelessness. I've hired people that literally cried on the phone because they didn't have to sleep in their van. Like that was going to come to an end soon.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that kind of goes to be said with the type of recruiter you are versus some that are more on the administration side. But you smile because you know what I want to say.
Yeah.
There's a difference, it makes a huge difference not only on their life, which obviously it does. You're offering them a job. Like this is huge. Like they're going to be able to pay your bills, but there's 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 I don't want to see a satisfaction because I feel like that's devaluing and kind of putting it on the wrong path, but there's something to be said for that call when you're like you just changed my life with getting this job, especially when it's somebody you advocated for, when you're like, hey, notice this person. Like they've got the goods. Like just interview them. Just give them just the first interview. I'm telling you, and especially when you made it all the way through and now they're getting the job and, everybody's high fiving. But there's something to be said about that. It's very rewarding, I guess is the right word. Being able to do that with candidates. And I know you as a recruiter, that's something that's very important to you as well. And you were able to change that focus from saving someone's life in the ER during COVID or something like that to saving somebody's life with a job.
Yeah, no, it's definitely helped with my transition. I've seen a lot of veterans struggle with that refocus because some of them go into like major corporations and it's kind of like your corporate drone again. And I just tell them that, one of the biggest lessons I had to learn when I got out is that my profession doesn't have to define who I am. Like when you're in the military, it defines who you are. When you're a private citizen, though, you can define your own path with what you do after work, whether that's volunteering with veterans or volunteering at the animal shelter. Like you don't have to wrap up your entire identity with your profession. Now, LinkedIn, I'm definitely a recruiter like identity. But outside of LinkedIn, my Facebook's just memes and, fun talk like that. I don't have to go on large tangents about how I would change the hiring process.
Absolutely. And you said a lot there. You truly did because like it's, it really isn't wrapped up in your title. Like you can have this whole thing. Like I know so many people and I couldn't even begin to tell you what they do. And it's the truth. And if you really think about it, you can be appreciated for what you bring to the table as a person. You can be respected for who you are as a person, for your character. Not respected just because you have a certain title. And then it kind of goes into that thing, like I was chatting in an episode for Field Graders Gone Wild, my favorite, one of my favorite outside of Mafia Made. I'm telling you, my two favorites segment titles. But I was chatting with my friend Paul and we were talking about, how his title just says procurement manager. And when you have certain levels, they're looking for a specific title. And you could bypass a really good paying job. He makes more now than what he did with BAH, BAS, and salary as a full bird colonel. Active duty, 29 years.
Damn, I need that job.
Right. But his title senior manager. Would you equate the salary to the thing? No, you wouldn't.
Nah.
But he's in $1 billion corporation. That's where that comes in. And you have our E5s and below that are getting out. And when they're looking at things, I know that they're applying for jobs they're qualified for. So let's tap into that real quick. They're skipping over the jobs because they're thinking, oh, well, I don't have any qualifications. Oh, I'm not sure if I'm qualified. I need to start at the bottom again. You don't have to start at the bottom. You don't have to do that. I mean, you didn't start at the bottom in reality. Luckily, you did have a SkillBridge that kind of smoothed that over a little bit. But in reality, you were building your network prior to SkillBridge, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you were already on that path to get yourself and get your foot in the door as a clinician recruiter. And all you had to do is say, hey, I have actual clinician experience. I have all this. I can find your people because I know what they want to hear. I know
Yeah.
how to talk stethoscopes and needles. I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you can speak to that, and that would have made you put you at higher. But if you were to take a step back and you were to look at your experience and you were to look at a recruiter rec, you could actually say, hey, I'm not qualified for that. I've never recruited anybody anymore, and bypass that position, right?
Yeah. That's very true.
So it's understanding how your job relates and could benefit that position, right?
Right.
So your corpsman-ness, I just coined that, by the way. Your corpsman-ness is the benefit to you being a successful recruiter and the fact that you had built up your network. So that way you were able to prove. So let's say, oh wait, hold on, let me take a pause. So what do you have to put in on that aspect of it?
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of veterans, they think because they were a private or a lance corporal or an HM3 that they don't have leadership experience or that they should come in at, like you said, like the ground floor. They need to be the junior or the associate. But I really think that personality and the qualifications will always come, but the personality is hard to train. And some of it's luck. I'm going to be honest. Like, if it wasn't for Tiffany, like, I wouldn't be where I'm at because I would have been pursuing an operation. She, as a good recruiter, was like, "Hey, I see these intrinsic abilities and qualities this individual has, and I'm going to push them to a different route." Because recruiting was never on my mindset. It was never on my horizon. I was like, "Nah, not interested." I actually joked when I was during my interview. I was like, "Yeah, I don't want to be one of those used car salesman recruiters that," because I
My
just
goodness.
been hoodwinked. I just been bait and switched by a different company. I was so upset by it. And she was like, "What do you know about recruiting?" I was like, literally, for one of the first questions my hiring manager asked me, she was like, "What do you know about recruiting?" I was like, "I know they lie," because that's what the Navy recruiter did for me. And she laughed, but she was like, "All right, like, let's dive into that." But no, I think that veterans, like, don't. Like I said, don't allow your job to just define who you are. You're more than just a corpsman. You're more than just a mechanic. You have much more greater abilities than just what you were trained for in the military.
You absolutely do. And there's so many other avenues too. And I'm hoping to have more E5s and below on here I want to spread across the board. If it were up to me, I'd have every MOS rate there is out there. Because I want to show everybody how you can transition. And give them ideas and places to go and things like that. I don't know why I keep waving this pen around. I'm holding it. It's there. But so we go into a little bit of hanging up the uniform, which was different. So now you're kind of at that PCS sort of area. You're due to PCS soon. It's terminally in your head. How do you combat that? How do you combat that to stay in your job? Because I mean, you've had your position for a little while, which is great. This is all good. It's positive things. But what I want to get across is, how do you stay? Because we're kind of trying to curb veteran turnover, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get through that mindset and get through that body clock to stay where you are and realize that, hey, good things are coming. This is just a part of the cycle.
Man, that is probably one of the best questions I've ever been asked on any podcast or really anywhere. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. The PCS mindset, I mean, you're right. Like, every so often I look at it, I'm like, man, should I stay here? Should I jump? I would tell most veterans, obviously statistics tell us, right? Like, that I would say it's like 60 or 80% of veterans leave their first job within the first 12 months of leaving the service, which is fine, right? I made it 18 months in my first job and then I left. Be strategic. Understand that, one, being a job hopper is not a long-term guarantee for success. And then the other one is, it's okay to take a second. You don't always have to be actively growing. And what I mean by that is, like, every duty station we try to get promoted. My first duty station, I didn't get promoted. My second duty station, I got promoted. My third duty station, I got promoted. But there's something to be said if you can sit in and become a master of your trade. Like, my plan is to at least be a recruiter for another 2 years, so I have 5 years under my belt and be a master recruiter, and then maybe make a pivot into business development or like running a sourcing team or whatever the long-term goal is. But I would tell that to veterans is sit down, It's okay to sit in one place. You don't have to do, like you said, the PCS mindset every 2 to 3 years. You got to jump. You don't have to stay somewhere for 20 years. You don't have to stay somewhere toxic because you have to hit a certain like metric or an arbitrary number. I would just say, like, if it's a healthy environment and you're seeing gradual growth, that's okay to be in. That's okay to stay in. If you're in an environment that's toxic, that's terrible for your mental health, obviously leave. If that's 6 months, if that's 2 months, if that's 2 years, right? Like but like you said, the PCS mindset hurts veterans because they don't learn how to stay committed. They don't learn how to, when people talk about military veterans, they're always like, oh, they know commitment. No, we know what it's like to be locked into a contract. And if we were to leave, we would be sent to prison. So that's different commitment because that's forced versus like out here, you don't have the threats. I mean, you have unemployment, you have like, financial ruin, but you don't have somebody being like, hey, if you leave this job, we're going to throw you in prison. If you try to run away, if you try to quit, it's prison. We don't have that here. So it's a lot. I would say it's harder to stay committed if you don't have a good company. If you're not working somewhere that's a great place to work, it's definitely a challenge because there's so many times where work gets hard and you're like, you know what, I'll just quit. Just gonna put in my notice. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna go. Oh, this hiring manager didn't get back to me, and like the candidate's mad at me. I had a bad day. I'm just gonna quit. Like it's so much easier for veterans to do that. And I think that's one of the reasons that they have the tenure or the turnover that you mentioned that they do because for 8, 20 years, whatever it was, we couldn't say no and we couldn't say I quit. And then when you're given that freedom, sometimes you abuse it because you're like, well, I'm not happy here. Like I had a bad day. I'm going to quit. And instead of being like, hey, let's take a step back. Let's wait a week, see how I feel then, and then make a decision. Most of them are just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to leave.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. I think that I absolutely agree with that. And there is that freedom and I welcome them to enjoy that freedom. And what I try to when talking to service members, because they've transitioned, they're already out. And the transition is something that we got to put it out there. Transition doesn't stop once you start your new job. Transition doesn't stop after a year. Transition is the rest of your life. You are going to be transitioning out of the military because there's so much that's ingrained in you that is going to be different in the civilian sector. It's just going to be a little thing at a time that's going to change, or that you're going to fit. I wouldn't say fix, develop, or transition into something, adjust. There you go. Into something different. And so that way it fits within your environment. But one of those things is understanding that lull, the ebb and flow, and you might be at a good place and you might be frustrated. I may not talk to a service member the other day. Well, they haven't, they're a recruiter. Well, they haven't promoted me yet and I deserve a promotion, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, bro, I'm telling you, you're going to get a rude awakening when you get out here on the scene because it hurts. Like it hurts right now. You're not going to get another job.
A lot of veterans have that issue too, where they want to be the team leads again. They're so used to leading. I'm sure the field grade people are even worse at it. But I've had that talk with like captains and majors and higher, where even a colonel, I was like, do you want to do this? Like I had a colonel reach out, an Air Force colonel that had a healthcare administrative background. She wanted to be a VP. And I was like, you sure you want to be a VP? Because out here, VPs work 60, 72-hour work weeks, and it's a long day. And, you did 20 years, you did 30 years. You sure you want to go back to that? Maybe it'd be nice if you go be a manager or be a director instead of a VP. And that's what I tell a lot of veterans, regardless of rank, is, you don't have to come in and be the leader. I've turned down director positions because I enjoy being an independent and individual contributor. It's nice. You don't have to have accountability for anyone but yourself. It's like a dream when you've been an E5 for a little while and you're like, man, I'm tired of dealing with these knuckleheads. But that's something I would definitely tell veterans is like, like I said, you don't always have to pursue the next promotion. There's no timeline out here. There's no timing grade where you have to be an E4 for a year and a half, and then you're expected to be an E5 and, so forth. I think that that's a mentality that veterans need to break because it can be toxic. It can be, if you're constantly chasing, eventually you're going to hit the ceiling in any industry. If you come in as a VP, there's not much more past that.
No, exactly. And there's that But what if you're not ready for that type of responsibility? Because it's different in the civilian sector. It's your head on the block if you lose somebody.
Yeah.
What if you don't want to be the manager and now you're being called to the table because why did they quit? Well, you got to answer that question. What if you don't want to answer that question? What if you just want to be just a person doing a job and not caring?
Or you don't have
No,
the understanding of the industry, like you were
ex-
saying. Like they come in
exactly.
as a manager, like it's not a we're teaching you, it's you're here to perform.
Yeah.
Versus you come in as an IC, you're more likely to be taught.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I push other people is you don't have to start at the bottom. It's not the bottom. Not and that's the biggest thing is to talk about, and we'll kind of go into that a little bit, is you could have someone who doesn't manage people and someone who manages people and they make the same amount. So, managing people and the more people you manage is not a clear sign of your title of progression. That could be just a different side of the house. Versus if you're managing projects, you can make a crap load of money. And guess what you're not doing? Managing people. Or you could be managing accounts. Account management doesn't manage people. You can be in a senior account manager, not manage people, but they still make a lot of money. So there's definitely different areas that you can progress into that you're not managing people, but it's still a respectable title. And it helps with your transition in a way of allowing you a break, a moment to breathe, where you can still earn a paycheck, kind of get out some of the stuff, get through your emotional transition. And then eventually if you wanted to manage people and work a 60-hour week job like you talked about and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely I'm thankful that I transitioned and didn't have responsibility, that I was afforded the first time in like almost 4 years to really just focus on myself. I didn't have to worry about Joe Schmo's promotion or his eval or, anything like that. I've seen so many recruiters or veterans in the last 3 years that have made that jump to management and they struggle during their transition because they can't just focus on themselves. They have to focus on the team. So, like, one of the big pieces I tell a lot of the retirees is like take a step back. Like if you did 20 years as a leader, you don't remember what it's like to be a follower. It's going to be much more beneficial for you to transition into a follower position than a leader position because out here in the civilian world, you don't have that hierarchy. You just because you have the title VP doesn't mean people are going to salute you and people are going to run and get you coffee, which I saw at a company where a person was fired because they asked a junior to go get him coffee. Like this, again, not the military, but I think that that's something that if I could tell any of these senior, like the field graders, that's what I would tell them. Like, take a step back because it's going to be a new industry. There's going to be new rules, new regulations that are outside the military's purview. And there's a different focus because you're not just focused on completing the mission, you're focused on turning a profit and avoiding a loss.
We just talked about that. My last episode was profit loss. Too funny. I'm going to do a reel of that segment. Or that little part that you just did, that clip, I swear I'm going to do a reel on that. But so when it comes to our E5s and below, one thing that I loved when I was a hiring manager, I loved E5s and below. They're my favorites for a reason. I can plug and play. Literally anywhere I could plug and play. Now, there's one thing that I know from not only growing up around and being around E4s and E5s, but also managing them and listening to the stories of other people managing them. You have your E5 who might check in with me maybe a couple of times just to make sure things are going the way that I need them to go. But they take little instruction and they're off to the races. I can say, hey, I need this done. This is what I need it done. And they might not have any clue of what I'm talking about, but they're going to figure it out. And they might ask one more question. They might check in with me. Hey, I just want to make sure like I'm on the right path. And then that's it. And they're gone. They're getting the job done. Then we have our E4s. I love y'all. Know that I do. But they get stuff done and just know it's done. Like, don't ask any questions. The job is done. You asked me to figure it out. I figured it out. There might be some shady shit going on in the background somewhere. The job is done. No, I'm just kidding. But they're amazing. They're great at taking. I worry less and I'm challenged less. And that's one of the things that I love about them is I can just say, "Hey, go do this." And they're going to lean on that experience that they have and they're going to go out there and they're going to get the job done. And that's something that I really want to highlight in this segment is they could have little experience to no experience in something, but yet the job still gets done. And because they're very driven, they're extremely resourceful is our E5 and below pop. And they're out there and they can make a difference in a way that you're not going to get from any regular civilian. I mean, I think you would agree with me in that.
Well, I love how hungry they are because typically, like an E4, E5, they gotta be there at least 4 to 5 years, so they're a little bit more mature than people that are just civilians that are the same age because they've had responsibility. They might be team leaders, they might be leading operations. So I think I love bringing in E4s and E5s and below because they're hungry. They're not just complacent because they have a retirement and because they did 20 years and think they know things. Some of the best corporate employees I've seen are the E5s and belows. But like that's why I like E5s because they like E5s and below because they're hungry. They know that they're the junior guy on the totem pole for the most part, and they have something to prove. So a lot of them come out, they're very highly qualified. I knew E5s that got out with master's degrees, doctorate degrees, PMPs, and if there's any civilian hiring manager listening to this podcast, I would say don't let rank define quality of candidate. Like, don't just focus on the colonels or the E7s because I've seen job descriptions that are like, must be an E7. And it's like, dang, you could have got the guy who's an E5 working in that role that's hungry for the job and that's wants to learn. Like, when I was getting out, I didn't have recruiting
And
experience to
could
lean
do
on.
it and
Yeah,
could give and could give a shit. Because let's be honest. I mean, I hear it all the time. Oh, I don't have to work here. I make enough in retirement and VA. I
yeah.
ain't got to do this job. Well, then fucking don't. Sorry, I know I just dropped the F bomb, but then don't. Like, be here and work as hard as everybody else go find something that fits within and give that E5 a chance, because they're going to work their ass off. They're going to come in, they're going to make a difference and a positive difference in a camaraderie way. And it's just such a difference. And the attitude is different. The way they do things is different. I'm going to say it again. The camaraderie is different. Like they work as a team with everyone else, which is amazing. So I absolutely agree with that statement. They are very driven and they get stuff done. They got GSD.
Well, it's like, like I was saying, like when I got out, I didn't have any recruiting experience. And I knew that I was the most junior guy. So when I got selected and got my offer for recruitment, the first thing I did, like we talked about in the beginning, is I built that network. Then I went on every Facebook page that I could find that was recruiter related, Reddit as well, LinkedIn, and I just studied recruiters. I did so much more effort than what I see even senior recruiters when I interview them do because I had to play catch up. I had to pursue the certifications to get qualified to be given a seat at the table. So if I had gone out and I've seen E6s, even E5s that were recruiters in the military get out and they're not as successful as recruiters because they have that complacency mindset. Well, I did it in the military, and recruiting in the military is pretty different than recruiting in the civilian world. So,
Lots different.
that's why I've always been a fan of like hiring the junior guy, hiring the underdog, the new guy who's junior, who's hungry, who has a family to feed. Like he's gonna work longer hours, he's gonna work harder, and they're gonna put a lot more effort in.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I'm glad that we had you on. Do you have any final last advice for our E5 and below pop who are out there or who potentially could be out there at some point?
Yeah, I would say definitely follow this podcast. Listen to every veteran. No, for real. Like one of the greatest assets that I did when I was transitioning out was mentorship. When that website Veterati was still up, I had multiple mentorship calls with people of various degrees of transition. I had people that just transitioned within 6 months. I had people that had been out for 20 years. Everybody has their own different experience, But from there, you're able to cobble together and say, hey, this is the common pitfalls that a lot of people noticed. Mentorship was key. Actually giving a fuck about your transition, and don't just leave it in the military's hands. Don't just say, hey, because I did TAPS, I'm ready to go. Like, you need to, like, this is going to impact you more than anyone else. It's your transition. So if you don't care about it, no one else is going to care as much as you will. And at the end of the day, you're left holding the bag. So that's another thing, is like, take time to build yourself up when you're in the military. If you're getting out without a degree, it's a tough market without a degree. Make sure you take advantage of like talent or tuition assistance. Make sure that if you get the opportunity to attend trainings that can translate over to the civilian side, take those trainings. It's always blown my mind when people have been in a spot like Shore Command where they've been solid for 3 years with no deployments, no distractions, and they don't have any credentials to their names. So that's the thing that I would tell the E5s is, if you're planning to get out, 1, follow this page. 2, get mentorship. 3, get qualified, because that's what's going to carry the day. You may not have 10 years of experience, but there's a lot of people that would hire an E5, former E5, with 1.5 years of experience in a bachelor's over somebody with 10 years in a master's.
I would agree with that, and I definitely appreciate that sound advice, and it's absolutely true. If there's one thing I would add to the end of that, is don't get advice from people who are still active duty. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't. I'm here to tell you,
great.
you don't.
That's great. When I was getting out, that's what happened. They marched me to like 6 different offices. I had E6s that had been in for 20 years. And they were like, what are you going to do out there? It's a terrible job market. It was 2022, which is like
was a great job market.
Perfect job market. Yeah. And he's like, you don't even have that much. I was like, I have a bachelor's and associates and a license for nursing. If I can't make it with that, I'm done anyways. But they were just like, you don't have enough to bring to the table. Like, don't let them scare talk you into staying in because they stayed in. And like you said, don't take the advice, because what do they know? They've never been through the process.
They haven't had a job since they were bagging groceries at the local hoppage shop. How would they know anything about being a manager in the civilian sector or the job market? In reality, you're shielded from it when you're active duty. So it's definitely sound advice. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you were here. This has been such a great conversation. So many little bombs being dropped so many times during the episode, and I'm so excited for it. So definitely keep staying tuned. Zero Dark Thirsty, Mafia Made, any of our other segments. There's yummies everywhere. I'm telling you, it's like a smorgasbord of information in all of the segments. Definitely dig in, because there's so much more to come on Mafia Made here at Zero Dark Thirsty. Bye, you guys.
Yeah, this is what we do. Logistics wins wars, it ain't no dispute. Shout out to my veterans, I gotta give salute. E-Mafia will finally get to tell the truth. Yeah, let them